Cool, man. So look, I really appreciate you coming and joining on these interviews. Basically what I wanted to do was interview a load of sort of people who I consider to be fishing influencers, people who are sort of predominant, top of their game, and your name was definitely up there. And when I saw you sort of get involved with the last video, which I did with Jason, I thought that was a great opportunity to ask you. So thank you very much for coming and joining in on this.
No, fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for people who don't know you, you're a TV presenter, so you've done Hunting Fish.
Yeah.
You're also an incredibly successful tournament angler. I see you plastered all over Facebook at the moment with your partner, Kev Cox. You guys have been basically cleaning up on all of the big tournaments. You fish with Weston, which is, you know, I love Weston stuff. Big fan.
Yeah.
And then you've got your own self-titled YouTube channel, which again is brilliant. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely go over and have a look at your channel. It is absolutely ram-packed with like loads of good little bits of information. And I've gone on there and I've listened really intently with my notepad, sort of taking little notes on what to do. So it's brilliant to have you here. So how's your Christmas been, first of all, before we get into fishing?
Yeah, it's been good. I think like most other people, you know, COVID's been a bit of a kick in the teeth for, you know, business, family, socializing, fishing, all sorts of stuff. But I suppose we're all in the same boat. We just got to suck it up. And Christmas was similar. It was a much shorter version than what we'd originally planned with the family. But yeah, it was good. It was good. I love Christmas time, actually. A huge fan of, you know, it is family time. So the little bit of family time that we could have on Christmas Day was great.
Yeah. Have you got kids?
No, I've got one on the way. First one on the way.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are just past the halfway stage. We've got a little boy coming, so no doubt he'll be an angler. I basically said to my wife, "You've got him till he's about 4, and then he's coming fishing a lot with me." So
Yeah, I mean it's great. I do take my daughter fishing sometimes, but there's an attention span thing, which you'll find out. But like when it's going good, attention span is fully on it, but like the second it sort of peters off a little bit, yeah, hard to keep them involved. But it's individual to individual kids. And I know that you like cooking as well, so have you been doing your cooking?
Yeah, massively into. I'm big into kind of anything wild. So work for me is, as well as the TV presenting stuff, I've got an outdoor pursuit centre down in Cornwall. So it sleeps like up to 18 people, and we do lots of we do fishing, foraging, firelighting, butchery, all of the kind of original, like a little bit of survival, but just connecting with the wild. And I'm a massive fan of all of like wild food. So yeah, everything from, I've got 4 chickens out there, through to foraging mushrooms, through to a little bit of hunting every winter as well. I love my wild meats, and it's more about, once you've got really good ingredients, you then kind of have to be a half decent cook, you know, otherwise you're not doing it any justice.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds brilliant, man. I love all of that kind of stuff. I used to do a bit of hunting myself, but I had to weigh it up because, you know, if you get a firearms license or anything like that, it's, you know, it's quite a sort of commitment, isn't it? And you have to be very careful. I was always worried that like bullets were going to go flying off in the wrong direction, like ricochets and stuff like that. So I sort of followed fishing a little bit more than shooting. But
yeah, you've got to be careful. But, you know, from my point of view, I grew up on a farm up in Lancashire on my grandparents' farm. We live on a farm now. My wife's a flower farmer and a florist, so we grow all of our own flowers and she sells them. And yeah, we've got chickens, dogs, cats, a little bit of land, a little bit of woodland, and yeah, it's just part and parcel for our way of life, really.
Oh mate, that does sound idyllic. Nice. Oh, okay. So, getting into the interview, wanted to ask you first of all, sort of what age did you start fishing, and how did you get into it?
I started, so got very, very vivid memories of this actually. Started on the Basingstoke Canal down at a little place in Fleet called Pontail Bridge. Funnily enough, I was there literally a couple of days ago because I went home, and I always, although we were only there for Christmas Day, I actually stole an hour's worth of fishing to go down. And yeah, that was where it all started for me. My dad took me, maggots, a little waggler, catching a few small perch, the odd little roach and stuff like that. And then once you hook into a tension, you lose it, and the whole mysticism of fishing starts to really capture you when you're a kid. You know that there's these great big beasts under the water, and it turns quite mythical, I think, trying to catch one. So I think like most people, just something small and simple when you're young, and it's been a lifelong pursuit now hasn't stopped, 30 plus years.
Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? It's funny you mentioned that kind of mythical thing, because like I've got a very, very vivid memory of when I was young as well, watching, reading Wind in the Willows, and I've got a really sort of strong memory of Mr. Fisher, the frog, sitting on the lily pad with this huge fish sort of circling underneath it, and I really think it captured my imagination. Weirdly, like I didn't think I was that deep, but I saw that. I was talking to my wife about it actually the other day, because I don't know how I got into fishing really, because my parents and nobody else in my family fishes, but that's a very vivid memory, and I think there probably is something like that with a lot of anglers. There's just something which sparks the imagination, and then you're hooked.
Yeah, I mean, for me as well, it was the whole natural world. I remember growing up, the books that I was most interested in were like animal books, animal encyclopedias even. It probably sounds quite boring for like a 6-year-old, but I used to love flicking through, I've got this one book in particular, it's still at my dad's house, and it was a big thick one. I used to flick through, and it went through everything from marine species to safari animals and huge mammals and all sorts of stuff. And I couldn't get enough of it. And I think that's probably why I then went on so I studied marine biology at university. I then traveled the world as a scuba diving instructor and a marine biologist for quite a few years. When I came back, I set my business up that was very connected with kind of nature and being outdoors in the wild. I've always found it fascinating. I always think it's just endless. It's completely endless. The experiences that you can have, changing the seasons, changing the temperatures. It's why I love fishing so much. You can never learn it all. You can never know it all. It's just endless. I think that's the best thing ever.
Yeah. Oh God, that's amazing. That sounds. I had a very, very similar experience to you actually. When I was a kid, my mum came from Australia, and she was a microbiologist, but she had this kind of like rack of cards, which were basically every single animal, and and you could sort of go through them. So it had all the snakes, all the fish, and I used to pour through those. Just like you were saying, actually, I used to look at the sharks a lot, sharks and snakes. But yeah, and then obviously scuba diving. Wow, so you must have had some brilliant experiences doing that.
Oh, amazing! Do you know what? And it actually helps. It helps you in your fishing. I think anyone out there that's really, really keen on their fishing, I mean, it borders on the obsessive, and we all know whether we're that or not. And I think most of us probably are. But when it borders on the obsessive, there's so many different angles. So I've actually done even a little bit of scuba diving and stuff in freshwater lakes. And you wouldn't believe some of the stuff that you can learn when you go down there. I mean, me and Kev in particular, we've been playing around with water wolves and underwater cameras, trying to get like every little bit of understanding about, about fish behavior, about their feeding habits, about, whether they're there or not. Because I suppose the sonar technology has been has been amazing, but it's still got that ambiguity to it where you're not actually exactly sure, well, what type of species are they? We can have a guess, or, you know, is it weed? Is it fish? Is it particulate? Is it fry? You know, is it shrimp? That type of stuff. And when you stick a camera down, you start to learn so much more. So yeah, I mean, I've learned all bits of fishing, from my scuba diving to, yeah, all sorts. It's brilliant. In fact, one story, there was an old estate lake that a chap asked me to, they basically got the lease on it and they'd started fishing. There was a few carp in there, some tench, some bream, that type of stuff. And someone had lost a pole section, and there was also this massive snag that they wanted to take out. And it was only 5 minutes down the road from me, and I got all my scuba kit. So I said, oh yeah, I'll go in. So I went in, retrieved this pole section, managed to find that within 5 minutes or so. And I was pulling this snag out as well. But we were also, I did a little bit of a test, because we used to catch on the method feeder, but there were some pegs that you would catch on the method feeder really well, and other pegs that you couldn't get a bite. And sometimes, even if you were only casting halfway between one peg that fished and the next one that didn't, there were just areas that you would catch and other areas that you weren't. And when I went down there with my scuba diving stuff, it was basically gravel, but it wasn't necessarily because the fish loved feeding on gravel. But next to the gravel were these little channels, and the silt was so soft that when I actually went down scuba diving, you could put your hand on top of the silt. You could only see sort of about a foot visibility, but you could put your hand on top of the silt, and it was almost, you could move your hand like this and the silt wobbled. It was almost like jelly because it was so thick. Yeah. And basically a method feeder would go in and it would sink out of sight, and they would never be able to find it. And you know, 5 yards away is a harder gravel spot, so they actually had access to the bait. So all types of things like that. You think to yourself, why can't I catch, you know, matey next door to me is catching, I can't get a bite. And sometimes it's down to stuff like that you'd never know unless you actually kind of got into the water. But yeah, really interesting stuff.
That's crazy, because I there's something very similar here, because I live down on the sort of North Kent coast, and like I'm literally a couple of yards away from the beach. And like my section of beach here, basically it's kind of silty, but probably about 500 yards up, it gets a little bit gravelly, and you just get these tiny little mussels. You know, it is quite kind of like a mini mussel bed. Catching bass down here, you'll only ever catch babies, like little, you know, juvenile bass. But you go up to that section there, big bass. It's only ever sort of big bass which come in there, and like it's so interesting. Like I've never lure fished here, but lure fishing up there, potentially you can get into something really good. So I know exactly what you mean. It's
and that's the whole watercraft thing for me. So as much as, you know, I'm sponsored by Humminbird and Minn Kota as well, so I'm big on my electronics, but as much as you can know through your electronics, there is, you know, the old school watercraft, and being inquisitive and trying to understand fish patterns, why they're in certain areas. It might be because of, you know, maybe the water's a little bit clearer, maybe the mussels are a food source for them, maybe do you know what I mean? There's so many different things that you have to try and understand in your angling, and I think that watercraft is, you know, you can never beat that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've got a bit of an edge on people with that, with your background and your interest in it as well, of course.
Maybe, yeah.
So you've been an incredibly successful tournament angler with Kevin this year.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare for a big tournament?
A lot of practice, you know. I mean, first of all, you have to be the type of person that likes competition fishing. I grew up in my early days, you know, going to a local club, fishing junior competitions, you know, maggots, fishing for tench and bream and stuff like that. Did quite well, progressed up into the adult stage, and I grew up, I cut my teeth, you know, with old school team fishing nationals, traveling all around the country, fishing winter leagues with a good amount of success. So the competition side was something that I absolutely loved to start with, you know, and there's plenty of people out there that it just isn't for them. But in terms of being a successful tournament angler, you know, you have to be quite committed to it. I'm on the phone pretty much every day with Kev. He's one of my best mates. He's a brilliant boat partner.
Yeah.
We've got a skill set that really complements each other, where there's a good crossover of skills, but then there's certain things he's better at, there's certain things I'm better at. So we make a really good team. But yeah, the preparation is key. I mean, in my kit room here, I learned that from my match fishing days. So for example, if you hit a snag, you break off a hook, a wire trace gets kinked, you want to change over, etc. You do not want to be tying up on the day. That is wasted minutes. And even in the tournament predator scene, the number of times that it comes down to centimeters, because most of the time it's done on you measure the fish, take a photo on the measure. And then you're either longest fish or cumulative. And honestly, the number of times, even when, like a really good example was Kev and I won Zander Cup last year at Rutland Reservoir. We had 34 Zander during the day for 12 meters 68, I believe that was right. 12 meters 68. And the second place team had 32 Zander for 12 meters 50. So, even once, you fish for a whole day, it basically came, a normal Zander in Rutland is about 40 centimeters. So it comes down to even after you've caught 30 odd of them, it comes down to half a Zander, and it's just, if one fish that we'd had dropped off, or if you'd spent, 3 minutes extra tying up something because you hadn't been prepared and you didn't get that extra bite that you needed, it comes down to such fine, margin sometimes that really is massive. So yeah, everything from getting all of your kit ready, plenty of practice as well, and you've got to learn, as the seasons change, you've really got to get in tune with those fish. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. I've just had a conversation with Kev this morning for 40 minutes about a session he had a couple of days ago. And there's a couple of swims on a gravel pit that have been fishing really well. He was convinced they were still there. He's fished for about 35 minutes on soft plastic baits that he's been catching well on for, a month or so. Couldn't get a bite, changes over to a hard bait, a jerk bait. And first cast, he hits one. Next cast, he hits another one. He goes back onto a soft plastic, couldn't get a bite, goes back onto a hard bait. Do you know what I mean? So even when they're in front of you and even when they're willing to feed, you have to be super tuned in to, if I often say, if I turn up knowing things that other people don't know, that is the biggest advantage. I'm not a better angler than most of the guys out there, but I tell you one thing, I'm more prepared and I'm generally more in tune with what those fish are doing, so if you've got to spend the first 2 hours figuring out, is it soft baits, hard baits, is it creature baits, is it drop shot, and I already know that, I'm 2 hours ahead of you.
Exactly.
And that's key, absolutely key.
So when you go down to a water, let's say you're just about to fish a competition, let's say in December, for example. Do you have like a go-to method which you'll start off? First of all, it'll be your kind of like, okay, if they're not going to be taking this, then I'll go on to this. If they're not taking that, then I'm going to go on to here. What would be your kind of like approach?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is I'd look at the weather. You can, if you're really in tune, I'm checking my weather app once or twice a day generally. And this is part of the watercraft thing. For you guys out there that might only get 1 day a week to fish or 1 day every 2 weeks to fish, this is, following the weather can give you a really, really good insight. It's never perfect. And like anything with fishing, it can, you can always be surprised and you think it might be one method and it turns into a completely different one. But, so for example, the old adage, if the wind's in the east, the fish bite least. And if the wind's in the west, the fish bite best, so I'm following those patterns. I'm following water temperature, and when I get there, I'm looking a lot at water clarity. So, for example, if the wind has been in the east for a few days, I know before we get there, it's going to be negative methods. The water's cold, only a few percentage of the fish are probably going to be feeding. And you set your expectations right. You're only looking for a few bites. And those negative methods for me are going to be things like Ned rig, drop shot, and Carolina are the main three. So Ned rig, the best way to fish a Ned rig is the lightest possible amount of lead on it. That is hands down. As soon as you start getting up to 4 or 5 or even 6 gram on a Ned rig, it just doesn't perform the same way it does as on a 2 or a 3 gram. Drop shot, there's no lead near the weight, which means it acts as natural as possible. Carolina, there's no lead near the bait, means it acts as naturally as possible. So slow, lethargic fish they're not going to chase baits. So you can tell that if you've got an east wind on that's been on for a week, there's virtually zero chance I'm going to be fishing, more than about 2 winds before I'm putting a pause in it. And even those 2 winds are going to be really, really slow, So that would give me an insight. Again, when you turn up and you've got water clarity, you're looking at the state of the water. If you've got a lot of color, that instantly puts a lot of methods out of the window for me. So if you've got a very, very colored amount of water, for example, I typically won't fish a drop shot because it just gets lost. You've got a small bait that gets lost in the visibility. So even though they might be quite negative, you're really only got one chance, which is you've got to create some vibration because there's no visibility in the water. So I would look at fishing very dark baits. And I would fish typically no more than about 6 inches off the bottom. So things like creature baits, paddle tails, even little chatterbaits that I'm only fishing for very short. I might fish even a crankbait. Crankbait's a little bit maybe on the aggressive side, but something you can fish slow, with a bit of vibration and something that's going to stand out in that dark water. So, across all of the methods, you've really got to try and get your method to try and match what you think it's going to do, and then you've got to be open to experiment. But I often talk about a continuum from very, very negative, where you literally might only be looking for 1 bite a day, through to those spring into early summer is often the best for me after they've come back on the feed after spawning. Perch, pike, zander, they all go absolutely nuts in that kind of early, like May-ish time. And that's often when the fishing's absolutely superb. May and probably September into October are the two times that I'm going to fish the most aggressive baits. Crankbaits really fast, chatterbaits really fast, big paddle tails. You can get away with what I call power fishing. And then in the harder times, you're going to be fishing those finesse methods like drop shot, Ned rig, Carolina, small paddle tails, fish it a little bit slower, that type of stuff. So yeah, I think that having understood that over the years, that tournament thing, you've really got to try and marry up the correct bait, the correct style of fishing, the correct method with the conditions or how active the fish are going to be, the mood of the fish. And that's really when you're going to get your most amount of bites.
And so you talked about sort of negative fishing with these kind of slow, lethargic baits. And then the flip side of that is basically positive fishing, as you said, power fishing, where you sort of, and what that would be your kind of like crankbaits, your chatterbaits. Yeah. And are you so bothered about trying to sort of get it right down on the level, or do you think that the fish will come up and find it?
Totally depends how pressured the fish are. I've fished abroad a lot. And when I'm fishing in Denmark and Sweden and Norway, they have huge expanses of water. They have good numbers of anglers, but a lot of the fish are catching have never seen a bait before, and they're just naturally incredibly aggressive, especially when you're pike fishing. So an old adage that they've got in the Scandinavian countries is basically when you're pike fishing, fish half depth. So if you're fishing in 30 feet of water, you're trying to count down so you're fishing at 15 feet, because pike always want to generally look up at a bait. And they don't really occasionally you'll catch them on bottom baits, but when pike are feeding properly, if they're really aggressive, they're always going to be skulking around just off the bottom. So anywhere between 1 and 3 feet off the bottom. So again, on your fish finder, If I see pike off the bottom, I know I can catch them. 100%, I'm going to catch them. If I see those pike and they're laid hard on the deck, it means two things. One, they've already been caught and they're sulking. And you can tell that from areas where, you know, you might have quite a few boats in a certain area and a decent concentration of pike, but you see those pike and they're virtually sat on the bottom. They're either sulking because they've been caught, or the pressure is so high that they know something's up. They've seen baits before, and you've got to adjust your techniques and your methods to try and trick one. But yeah, with your power baits, if the fishing's unpressured, you can, you know, that's why even you'll catch on surface lures. You'll never catch on surface lures if the pressure is really high. You know, which is why there's very few opportunities to catch on a surface lure in the UK. There's only a few venues, a couple of shallow rivers that I know. But, you know, your Rutlands, your Graphams, even when the fish are up in that 6 foot, they rarely take a surface bait because it's just one of the most aggressive methods there is. So, yeah, that totally comes down to pressure for me. But in the summertime, when the water temperature is warm, you can get them to move further, especially if there's a little bit of visibility. You know, again, looking at the clarity of the water. If those pike are on those red letter days, they'll come 10, 15, 20 feet to come and hit a bait. But again, you know, more and more I find in the UK now, the more finessey you go, the more technical you get with your, they generally, you know, you'll become a better angler and you'll catch more fish the more you tune in to the fine details of stuff and you know, get the presentation just right and get the method just right. You know, it's always going to pay for a finesse angler.
Well, it's funny you say that because, like, I mean, I was talking to Jason Vorster in the last interview, and like he's pretty much solely BFS, and that's kind of, I guess for me, that's something which I'm very interested in, and I've noticed that my catch rates have gone up hugely as I've scaled everything right down. And I think it's to do with the fact that they're probably seeing stuff which they've never seen before, and it's not so obvious, and it's much more finesse, really. So yeah, I'm completely on board with what you're saying there. There's some brilliant information in there. Thanks so much for sort of going into so much detail on that.
Yeah, it's probably, that's a massive bit of my success, though. You know, Kev and I were talking all the time, and we are paying attention to the details. You know, because we've seen it so many times, and if you keep your eyes open, this is what's amazing about fishing. Over the years, you create a little experience bank in the back of your brain. So even when you're not constantly thinking about it, it's still there. All of that information of every time you've been surprised, every time you've caught, you know, on a certain color, works in a certain clarity of water or a certain temperature, etc., etc. You know, you can always build up those patterns, and I'm hyper tuned into those patterns, and that's a massive advantage to me. And you can watch it on particular venues as well. You know, what I find is amazing. So like the pike fishing on Rutland, for example, is absolutely superb. It's huge. It's 3,000 acres on Rutland. There's only really a small handful of places that I know that you'll catch pike. But when the season opens on the 1st of September through to only 6 or 8 weeks later, sort of, you know, through September and October, I watch them change every single year, and I consistently manage to sort of carry on catching. I've been very lucky this year. I've had over 33-pound perch, and I've had 9 20s now, pike, and some of those have been in competitions, but a lot of it is paying attention. You know, a lot of people are still fishing like the big baits that you use on the first bit of the season, because they haven't been fished for a huge amount all through the summer and since last year. They're quite aggressive. The water's sort of warm. they haven't been fished for. You get a few weeks into the season, those big baits aren't working anymore. You've got to change your methods. You've got to change your baits. You've got to change. Sometimes your areas get pressured, and they start moving around the lake. And sometimes they're only 200 or 300 meters away from where is a consistently good spot. And it's just like a little bit of a game. It's like an arms race. They don't want to get caught. You're trying to catch them. It's just a game of cat and mouse.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, in the last interview, I was talking to Jason about this, and I was talking about a spot which I've been fishing, and I love perch, and I set out my stall to try and catch a good sized perch this year lure fishing, and I took my daughter fishing actually, which she seems to be a bit of a big fish magnet. And I don't know why. Like I've literally taken her fishing maybe 3 or 4 times, and I had this summer I had like a 45-pound carp fishing with her, and we had a 4-pound perch out of the river, which to be honest, I've only had fish to like maybe 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds out before, but it's an area where there's like a little sort of sluice, and there's basically water coming from a drain into the river, and it holds a lot of bait fish. And I've been trying to really sort of get down onto those little spots. And we had that big perch, and but after that, it's been really, really hard. And I don't know if it's because I put the video up and people saw where it was, and maybe that it's getting a bit more pressure. In fact, I know it's getting a lot more pressure. And so I went back in the morning when it was dark, because Jason had been saying to me, they'll often change their feeding habits if they're getting really pressured in the day. They'll often change it to night time. And so, I went down there. And in the first hour while it was still dark, I must have had 3 or 4 really good hits. I mean, the worst thing about it was I messed up every single one, which was like, but I'm not too proud to say that. But the point was, it was proven that they'd changed their feeding habits, and that was a sort of case in point.
Absolutely. I've seen it before. I've seen it on underwater footage. I think this is one of the reasons that, anglers get very obsessed about stuff. And it's one of the reasons that Corda got so big in the carp fishing world and dominates so hugely now, is because they were answering the questions that people had had forever. How do the carp behave around baits? How are they picking my baits up? What rig works? All of that sort of stuff. And it's amazing business strategy, because they get to sell all of the rig rings and all of the different shape hooks and all of the different link materials and all of the blah, blah, blah off the back of it. But it became popular because people wanted to know what was going on. And like you said, those fish are still there. But if you're trying to catch them in the middle of the day, I've seen it before. They couldn't care less. They're not interested. They're not going to move an inch for your bait, however you present it sometimes, and then maybe if you get the right presentation, one of them, and then you learn something new, like, I changed the time of day that I'm going, or I completely changed the method, and then suddenly bang, bang, bang. And you're thinking, I was convinced that they weren't there anymore. But they're still there, but they've just clued themselves up a bit, I think that's what everyone loves about angling. It's you're never going to learn it and then just be like, oh, I just catch fish now, and then it's like that for the rest of forever. It's constantly changing. You've constantly got to keep up. Your classic methods will always keep you catching a few, but if you're really interested, that's the competition angler in me. If you're really interested in trying to maximize your day, trying to catch as many as you can, trying to catch the biggest ones as you can, trying to work that riddle out, you've just got to think about it. The thinking angler gets himself a long way, I think.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it was funny what you were saying about Kevin talking about using jerk baits. I saw exactly the same thing a week ago. I was down on my local set of lakes. I'm not fishing the river at the moment because it's so muddy. And there's a whole group of guys, and I see the same guys down there, on a Saturday morning. they're all going around, and basically everybody's fishing soft plastics, everybody.
Yeah.
And this one guy turned up. I'd not seen him before, and I think he used to be a member of the club years ago, and he had just like a bucket full of jerk baits. And I was like, okay, it'd be interesting to see what happens. And I bumped into him the next week, and everybody has been finding it hard to catch fish. You might sort of pick one fish out here and there, and I spoke to him and I was like, oh, how's it going? It's tough, isn't it, at the moment? We're having, and he's like, I had a blinding session last week. Like, yeah, I had 8 fish out in like an hour. I was like, oh yeah, okay. And he was like, yeah, jerk baits. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, basically, he was doing something completely different to everybody else. And yeah, he cleaned up, basically. So.
Well, okay, so specifically, a bit of a tip for people out there. What you're looking for in a jerkbait or a crankbait that can work in a similar sort of way is you're looking for the bait to suspend. So you obviously get your floating crankbaits, suspending crankbaits or jerkbaits, and then sinking ones. The suspending ones at this time of year, when the water's down, it's sub 6 degrees now. Which means they are cold. They might feed in periods. Yeah, it might be those windows of opportunity. I often say, actually, it's the other way around. In summertime, you're going to catch best early light and late light, early in the morning and late at night, at those sort of dusky and low light periods. In the winter, it's the opposite way around. You actually want the water to warm up 0.5 degree, and the middle of the day is often best. And when you get that window, you'll probably catch on a few things. But if you're looking to try and catch outside of when that window is, your presentation has to be absolutely bang on. And when they're cold and they don't want to feed, you have to be able to hang a lure mid-water in their face for a long period of time. So there's 2 principles you want to think about. The first one is, how far is a fish willing to swim to eat your bait? And the second one is, how fast is it willing to swim to eat your bait? Okay, so the first one is super applicable to Zander. Zander, out of all of the species we've got, how far they're willing to swim to eat a bait is often somewhere around 3 to 6 inches maximum, which is why they sit hard on the bottom for huge periods of time. And again, this is why I get really technical. Different reel sizes have different retrieval rates. So generally a 1,000 size reel has a 60 centimeter retrieval rate per 1 turn of the handle. A 2,000 is going to be about 70 to 75, and then a 3,000 is going to be 75 up towards 80. Now, first of all, you've got to get your reel size right, because if I'm using a 1,000 and you're using a 3,000, every single turn of the handle, you're fishing 25% more than me. If I've got 60 centimeters per turn of the handle and you've got 80 centimeters per turn of the handle, I might say to you, 1 turn and then pause. But you're fishing 25% further and 25% quicker. Now, that might mean, so in a competition sense, a lot of people don't think about this, but I do quite a bit of maths on this type of stuff.
Yeah.
If that Zander is only willing to move this far off the bottom to eat your bait, and 1 turn of the reel brings it up this much for me, but 1 turn of the reel brings it up that much for you, but he's only willing to feed here, you're going to have a 50% success rate. So 50% is going to work and 50% isn't going to work. And I'm probably going to have nearer an 80% success rate. So that's when it comes down to like the fine details of trying to figure out, and a lot of people think, don't be so stupid. That's not how it works. 100%. Like Kev and I are hands down at the moment the best competition anglers in the UK. And that's probably sounds a little bit arrogant, but like we spend a huge amount of time, and, there were 6 big competitions this year. We won 4 of them. Because we're so tuned into the fine details of this. And it doesn't matter whether you're a predator angler or a carp angler or a roach angler, the more attention to detail that you pay in your fishing, the more you're going to, the better results you're going to have. So, yeah, I mean, it's stuff like that. And then how fast is the second question. Again, jig head size. The bigger the jig head, the quicker you got to wind it. Crankbaits, they only really work when you're medium at the slowest through to quite fast, unless you're putting long pauses in. But jerk baits, the reason that jerk baits work at this time of year, you get them down to depth, pop, pop like that, and then you want to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it'll go whack. And that bait has been sat there suspending in the water, and just think about it, they're so slow. Maybe it takes that pike 5 seconds to actually turn around and make the decision to get aligned. And if you've got a bait that's just gone whizzing straight through, he's just not going to be interested. If you give them long enough, that's why a Ned rig, drop shot, Carolina, jerk baits for pike, really, but any of those methods that you can fish really slow or even static for a number of seconds at this time when the water temperature is sub 6 degrees, they're always going to get you the most amount of bites. So yeah, a few tips out there. Sorry, I probably waffled on a bit there.
No, I mean, I find that kind of information incredibly interesting. I mean, like, it is, yeah, I mean, you've definitely gone down the rabbit hole with this stuff, but like, I mean, but obviously it pays off, because I mean, like, the proof's in the pudding, and I mean, you don't win those kind of tournaments by not knowing what you're doing, and yeah, I find that, I've never even thought about reel sizes when it comes to retrieve rates and stuff. Well, I mean, obviously I think about reel sizes for retrieve rates, but I've not thought of it in the same sort of context as you've just brought up. So that's that's amazingly interesting, man.
Yeah,
I was gonna. This was a question I was going to ask later, but like this kind of sort of feeds into what we're talking about at the moment. But I wanted to ask about the sort of reliance, sort of stroke importance of electronics when you're tournament fishing. I guess especially on reservoirs.
Yeah. So the first thing to notice about reservoirs is obviously the size of them. You've got a massive amount of water, hell of a lot of water out there. And in my experience, I actually learnt this fishing at Chew a number of years ago. It took me so long. I mean, I ended up moving to Bath, so I was only about an hour away. And I used to do a bit of fly fishing for pike because I couldn't get any, of the sort of dead bait and lure tickets. And then I started getting the odd lure ticket and stuff like that. But really, it took me, with electronics, I would say over 2 years to work out that one venue. And it was the first venue that I wouldn't say I fully cracked it, but I started to see an improved, increase in my results. I think it took me 2 years to catch my first 20. And then in the subsequent year after that, before I moved, I think I had about 7 or 8. And a lot of it is location. There are certain areas, and if you asked me why, again, I wouldn't know. It's a little bit what I said at the beginning. Maybe it's the hardness of the bottom. I haven't scuba dived a lot of these lakes. Maybe it's water movement. Maybe it's sun direction, north-south direction. Certain areas, certain bays. There are certain areas that fish love to hole up in. And then there are huge expanses of these big reservoirs that are what I call fishing in the desert, that you have got such little chance of catching, and electronics is really, they're just completely invaluable these days. There's only 2 ways to do it. One is experience. So it's going to take you bloody years to figure these out. You've got to drift so much of that lake, all those reservoirs, and then just partly by luck start figuring out where the concentrations of fish are by catching them, build your experience up like that. The way to shortcut that is electronics. Again, it's a massive, a lot of people are getting into they're quite expensive. The units that I use are over 2,000 quid each. I've got big side scan units. I've got Mega 360 units. The new live units are coming out. Garmin have got a live. Humminbird have got a live coming out in 2021. There's a lot of really interesting technology out there. The one thing that I would say to people is, however much you're going to spend, might be 300 quid, it might be 2.5 grand. Take the time to learn that unit. I've been out with people before that have got amazing units and they haven't got a clue how to use them properly, and that for me is just a complete waste. The best way to do it is actually book yourself a day on a reservoir and don't take your fishing rods. I know it's really difficult, especially for guys that might only have one day a week or one day every fortnight to go fishing, but it pays dividends to learn. And you don't need to learn. There's a million settings on them. I suppose this is where a guide is a good. If you've got someone that that's got a unit that's similar to yours or the same make, get them to take you out for an afternoon, show you which settings work and which ones don't, how to tweak it around, because there's no golden settings on your fish finders. You've always got to mix it up. You're mixing it up depending on depth, depending on what species you're looking for, depending on what type of lake you're on. There's loads of different factors that come into it. But once you learn, the people, so put it like this, the people in the competition scene that I see as the most dangerous or our biggest competition are also the ones that absolutely know how to use their electronics as well as know how to fish, because it shortcuts everything. So yeah, I mean, and again, part of it, like I said earlier, is the behavior. When on a side scan, for example, if I'm pike fishing, I'm looking for big concentrations of pike, and we'll drive for long periods of time. Me and Kev have no problem not fishing for the first hour or hour and a half of a competition. If it's a pike competition, we are looking for fish because they're the biggest out of the species. They show up on the side scan most often. We know what we're looking for, and then we're also, like I said before, we're looking for the difference between suspended pike and pike that are on the bottom. Sometimes you'll have areas of the lake where you'll see loads of pike and they're all hard on the deck, and we'll leave it because that's not what we're looking for. That's going to be difficult fishing. But if we can find half the amount of fish but they're suspended, they're so much easier to catch. So yeah, I mean, side scan is the game changer. I haven't used live scan yet. It's coming out next year with Humminbird. I'm sponsored by Humminbird, so I've got a unit on order. I think that could be really, really interesting in very specific scenarios. But I would say if you can get yourself a unit that has got side scan on it, you can see anything up to, I mean, I set mine normally at about 10 or 15 meters either side of the boat. So I'm scanning a sort of a 30 to 35 meter maybe wide area. That is an absolute game changer because you can see so much of what's in the water. You can see weed banks, you can see fish shoals, you can see the size of the fish, you can see whether they're suspended or not. You can see, there's so much you can see. It's amazing, the technology these days.
For somebody like me, for example, I have used fish finders and depth finders, just basic kind of Garmin, straight down, and I've seen videos where they're using these sort of new side scan units, and they're probably not that new anymore actually, but just for people who, because a lot of people don't fish reservoirs. And I think if you don't fish reservoirs or big sort of bodies of water, you probably aren't that familiar with like a lot of these electronics. So how does a side scan actually work? My understanding is it sort of scans down and then it kind of looks out to the side as well. Is that?
Yes. So I wonder if there's a way that I can. So I'll run through so for anyone that's not familiar with it, I'll try and run through the basics. So on a good unit that's got side scan, you're really looking at, it's got 4 main functions. The first one is what we call traditional 2D. All right. And that is, it's like imagine it like an upturned ice cream cone. It's a cone, circular cone that goes directly under the boat. And that is your traditional, it's got a color palette on it that will have blue and yellow and red. And the fish show up as arches. All right, that's a traditional 2D, and that's directly under the boat. You've then got down imaging, which is similar to 2D. It looks directly under the boat, but it does it in a slightly different way to give you a more detailed picture. So 2D is a good general, you can roughly see what's around. Down scan, it gives you a more specific. So for example, if I saw on 2D there was something on the bottom but I couldn't tell if it was fish or weed, I would then look on down scan to work out, is it a shopping trolley, is it a weed bed, is it fish shoal, and I'd be able to figure out the difference between the two. So that's directly under the boat. Side scan is the third one, and that basically fires a beam. So as you're driving the boat forward, it fires a beam out to the side constantly, and then as the boat moves forward, it effectively creates a picture of what you've gone past out to the side. And it's amazingly detailed. If you go past a suspended fish, so if I'm driving past and I go past a suspended fish, the beam can't get through the fish, so it ends up creating a shadow. So it's similar to like shining a torch out. Imagine you had two torches shining out the side of your boat as you're driving along, and you're looking for the shadows that are created on the far side of the fish. And the shadows can tell you, if it's absolutely perfectly broadside, I can actually tell you which way the fish is facing, what direction it's in, because I can see the forked tail and I can see the pointy end of a pike's nose, for example. And one thing in particular, Kev and I have got it so good now, the number of times that we can spot pike, maneuver the boat into a certain way, and we catch a pike on our first cast because we know where it is. We've done that so many times in competitions now. It's unbelievable. And then the fourth one is GPS. So you've got your maps and you can put waypoints on. You can see which direction the wind is blowing you if you're doing drifts on a drogue, for example, that type of stuff. And then all four of those put together really gives you just an unbelievable advantage to knowing, I want to, because obviously on your maps, you've also got all of your depth. So you've got contour lines. So we've got it now where I can link my Hummingbird motor, which is my electric motor, which sits at the front, the bow on the boat. I can connect that to my fish finder. I can drive around, and if I think that there's going to be a good number of fish in say 8 to 12 foot, I can position my boat on a contour line that maybe say 16 foot, and my electric motor will follow the contour line and keep me in 16 foot going around the edge of the lake. So as I'm casting towards the bank, I'm covering 8 to 12 foot in a really, really effective manner. It's way, again, like I said, with reel turns, 50%, if you've got the wrong size reel on, 50% of your retrieve might be out of the zone of you even being able to get a bite, and 50% might be in the zone. Again, if you're doing a drift on a drogue, for example, and the wind is in a certain direction, you might have to start in 22 foot, and then you're drifting towards the bank, for example, and then it comes up, and then you get in shallow water, and then you've got to drive your boat and come back and start the drift again. You're only going to be in that 8 to 12 foot zone for a very short period of time as you drift through it, and then you've got to start again. That might only be, you might only be in the correct zone for 20 or 30% of that drift. If I used my technology correctly and I've read and I've got the right principles and I've got it right that they are in 8 to 12 foot, I can basically be almost 100% effective using my technology in the right way. And, of course you're going to catch more compared to someone that's only in the zone 30% of the time. So, understanding all of that stuff is, again, it's a big minefield. But I mean, even for bank anglers out there, I mean, a lot of people don't fish the big reservoirs that we do, but for bank anglers, you can get the castable, they're not even very expensive. Maybe I think some of the non-branded or the cheaper Chinese ones are probably 80 quid, 60 to 100 quid maybe, and actually, even if you're fishing a bank, maybe you're fishing canal or a gravel pit that you're fishing from the bank, or a river, we've all done it before. We're obviously limited to the bank, and we make, and there's vast areas where you're not catching fish, and then you get to somewhere and you catch 4 or 5 in 2 pegs, and your electronics, if you spent the time going out, if you really wanted to try and find bait fish or concentrations of fish, or trying to understand, it might even just be a depth thing, might just be, like think about the Fenland drain systems. They are miles and miles and miles, and they're virtually all the same depth. And then you might find an area that's a bend, or you might find an area that's just 2 foot deeper than anywhere else. And if you knew that before, if you walked that, just putting the time in and finding, it's a little bit deeper here, and there's concentrations of fish here, you cut down all of your fishing in the desert time. It's just wasted space, wasted time. That a lot of people do in their lure fishing, because you haven't got bait to attract them. You're having to hunt them, so location's absolutely critical.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It sounds like you've got that down to an absolute art. I mean, it's really interesting sort of getting an inside take on that.
I've spent a lot of time on it.
I can see. Right. If money was no object, where would you be fishing in the world, and what species would you be fishing for?
The first thing that comes into my mind would be the bass competition scene in the US. I think the whole scene is just amazing. I've been over to the US before. I've fished for largemouth, smallmouth, stripers, not loads and loads, but I've done enough of it, and it's great fishing. I watch YouTube videos all the time because they're so far ahead in terms of their techniques and their understanding. And not all of it, but a lot of that stuff does cross over, because we're using, they use jigger rigs, and they use Texas rigs, and they use jerk baits and crankbaits, and they're using the same methods that we're using for perch and pike and zander. So I learned so much about the US, but the amount of sponsorship they get out there, the kind of boat setups they've got, the lifestyle, the size of the waters, oh my God. I would say, as speaking from a competition angler's point of view, that is the pinnacle that there is, for, if I still wanted to fish the same methods, that would be it. If I was just like dream fish, would be it would be a grander marlin. It'd be £1,000 plus marlin. I've had them up to about £600. I've had blues up to 600, but that is just an unbelievable milestone. And it's the type of fishing as well that is, oh my God, you can drive around on these boats for like 6-8 hours, 2 or 3 days at a time without a bite. And then when it actually happens, oh my goodness, it is the most exhilarating thing. You've got these arms, these rigger arms that stick out the side of these boats, and you've often got say 4 to 6, or more often than not 4 rods out the back, and 2 of them will be on the rigger arms. And when you get a bite on the outside rigger arms, basically the rods are sticking out the back of the boat, and then the line comes off at a 90 degree angle, goes to the rigger arm, and then goes out. So, and it's in a clip, effectively like a metal sort of clothes peg on the side. And it's on a little sort of, it's like doing the washing basically. And it's quite high. And the captain, because he's looking down the whole time, he often sees, because it's virtually all surface or just subsurface fishing, he'll see and he'll shout like, Marlin, back left. And then you'll hear it come out of the clip, and it smacks on the rigger arm and goes doing. And there's about 3 seconds before it tightens up and the reel starts going. And that is probably the most exciting thing I've ever experienced in my fishing. When that rigger arm goes twang, and oh God, it's just unbelievable, because you're attached to probably one of the most mythical, majestic, impressive, unbelievable animals on planet Earth. They are unbelievable. Marlin fishing, something else.
I've only marlin fished a couple of times, and like the first marlin I ever caught, they they always say, like, with the shotgun, the one which is closest in to the boat, is always if you're going to get a really big one, they get really aggressive and they'll come and hit that. And I was in Vanuatu, and I had like I think it was like 300-pound blue, maybe 350 something. And I just was sitting there, and the next thing, this fish the size of a horse came flying out, literally about 20 yards behind me, and like it's sort of like engraved in your memory, this kind of thing just kind of flying out of the sea. I mean, I know exactly what you mean. It's oh god, my arm nearly fell off trying to get that thing in there. Right,
they're just. And I think also, especially with blues, I'm not sure if it happens with black marlin as well, but definitely with blues. We've had it before where the water's super clear, and if you're up on the captain's deck, you can have a really good kind of view of them. And the way when they get excited, they might be tracking a lure for that lure is sort of popping on the surface, and they might be tracking it for a while, and then they'll go and have a look at one of the other ones. And the captain has to be super on the ball with like the speed that he's going at the boat. And sometimes it's going too slow. Sometimes you have to really crank up the speed of the boat and get them to kind of fire up. But when they get really excited, they've got this kind of like neon blue color that can light up on them. And I've seen it on all different parts of the body. I've seen it on the tail, I've seen it on the pectoral fins, lit up like electric blue. I've seen like stripes down the side of them. And it's just one of the most amazing things you're ever going to see in your life. Even if you weren't an angler, you would see that type of stuff and just be like, oh my God, look at that. I've never seen anything like that before.
It's like a mahi-mahi, isn't it? Have you?
Yes, exactly.
When they sort of like, they come out and like, you just like, what fish is this color? Like gold, blue dots all over it.
Blue and yellow spots. Oh, amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Bit more of a generic question. What is your most embarrassing fishing moment?
Oh, embarrassing. That's quite a good one. Oh God, when I was younger, I used to get so excited. We used to go on boating holidays on the Thames.
Yeah.
And most of the time when you're cooped up on the boat, it wasn't, but every time we'd moor up in the evening. I've gone, we were about halfway through the holiday and I'd already gone all the way through all of my sets of clothes because I got so excited I'd always fall in.
Yeah.
Other embarrassing ones. I've had a few when you're convinced that you're hooked into the biggest zander or biggest pike of your life, and it turns out to be a foul-hooked bream. That's quite embarrassing, especially when you've called it early. So, this is definitely a big pike. Not too sure on any other ones actually. But I think everyone's got one, haven't they? An embarrassing story.
I was told Jason, like when I was filming, I managed to snap this guy's 10 rod. He was like, it was
no,
and I snapped it. I was like, I had a massive rooster fish and I snapped it right in front of him.
Oh no!
Like, it was just like I always bring it up because it was just like the most awkward and embarrassing thing. I was just like, oh my God, I just snapped an 800-pound rod. Anyway,
you end up with a big bill.
So tell me a little bit about, I mean, I know you've got a television, you did a television series called Hunting Fish.
Yeah.
I did a show myself, and I
Yeah.
found it quite hard. But I'd love to hear about your sort of take on that. How was your experience with it all?
It was great. I mean, as an angler, I loved it. It was really a huge variety. So basically, a bit of the backstory. Many years ago now, crikey, this is probably going back 12 to 15 years. My TV career started when I tell you exactly when it was. It was 2007, 2008. It was Credit Crunch, so about 12 years ago.
Yeah,
And the summer after that, didn't have any money, still wanted a bit of adventure. I was in my sort of mid-20s and was chomping at the bit to do traveling, go traveling, but didn't have much money. And so me and two other mates decided to set ourselves a challenge of basically like traveling around. We were going to keep the costs really, really low. We were going to go and there's a scheme called woofing, which is working on organic farms.
yeah.
So you can kind of work for your bed and your food and stuff, do a few hours work during the day. We were going to go to, going to do a bit of hunting, a bit of fishing, a bit of foraging, a bit of wild camping, and just basically like potter about, but basically keep the cost down to close to zero as possible. And right at the last minute, we were due to go. So this was probably about the February, and we were going to go in like the June. And a mate of mine wrote off to, there was a TV show called River Cottage with a chap called Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall.
Oh yeah.
And he was kind of, we'd sort of grown up watching a bit of Bear Grylls and a bit of, wild chefing and stuff like that, and a bit of Ray Mears and whatever. And we ended up writing off to River Cottage because they did a few courses on wild food and stuff like that, saying, "Oh, we've got this trip planned, and we know that you've got a production company and stuff as well. YouTube was kind of kicking off at the time, and we want to film it and make some videos or something." Anyway, lo and behold, it somehow ended up with the head of the production company that's associated with River Cottage and Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall reading this email. And they said, "Oh, yeah, well, come in and have a meeting. We're always interested in new ideas." And we thought, "Oh, blimey, where's this going?" Cut a long story short, that summer, we filmed our first TV series. There was 3 of us. It was called Three Hungry Boys. And they just said, "Yeah, this sounds like a good idea." Originally, we'd planned to go around France and around Europe and stuff. And they said, "We've got to keep it in the UK." So they said, "Go up to Scotland. There's loads of, there's wild bovies and the right to roam and loads of wild land and food. And, we could go to the coast and do bits of fishing and shellfish and foraging and mushrooms and woodland and go to towns and work in exchange for produce and all this sort of stuff." So that was, and we did, that was on Channel 4. So we did 2 series of that. That went really well. And then off the back of that, I started getting a few opportunities I did a bit with BBC Natural History Unit. I did a bit with ITV, a few sort of bit parts. And then eventually got an agent and got an opportunity with a online channel called Insight. Got a 3-year contract and ended up filming sort of 6 or 7 series, I think it was, across 4-year period in the end. And it was amazing. And one of those was fishing. I basically said to them, fishing's my number one passion. I want to do a fishing show. And they were up for it. And so we did everything from, we went cod fishing in Norway through to grayling on the River Test, went to Extremadura trying to catch a Camiso barbel. We went zander fishing at Old Berry Hill. Loads of weird, and some of it was local and some of it was the other side of the world, so it was brilliant. I mean, fishing for the cameras is really difficult, and I think you've got to try and be a bit of a character because you can't always rely on the fish. You have to try and make a storyline out of it. So but yeah, it was amazing fun. We had a brilliant crew. That makes a TV show so enjoyable if you've got a good crew. And then, I mean, it's just everyone's dream opportunity, isn't it? We've been incredibly lucky with those experiences. So, it was,
that sounds amazing. Well, good on you for doing that. That's it sounds like you really sort of made that yourself. So, and that's tough. A lot of people think that these things get given to you, but actually you do have to make a big effort, and you have to come up with good ideas to sort of like do that kind of stuff. And
definitely, yeah.
And a huge
I mean, everyone thought we were mad. To be honest, it started from one lucky email that we wrote to info at a production company, basically cold calling, and then it started a journey, of like the next kind of 10 years for me in the TV industry. I've always had other stuff going on as well. I never really wanted to become a full-time presenter. I really enjoyed the series that I was doing, and I had 4 years of travel. I did I think it was 7 series, because I did other series as well. I did one called Extreme Earth Journeys, which was like walking across the Sahara Desert with Berber nomads, and living with Sami people up in the Arctic Circle, and reindeer herding and crazy stuff like that. And I traveled all over the world. I did 38 countries in 4 years across 7 series, and it was amazing. But like, I'm a bit older now, and we're back on the farm, and it's more about family life, just starting a family, got married last year, and it's a young man's game. Do that when you're in your 20s and your 30s, and I'm sort of back end of my 30s, coming up to my 40s now, and I'm perfectly happy just to be a bit more at home now. My traveling days are sort of done to a certain degree, but amazing memories.
Oh, that sounds brilliant, man. That sounds really, really good. Right. I've got this little fish facts thing, which I was going to basically, this is a little competition which I'm running with people I'm interviewing, and Jason got 7 out of 10. He set the bar pretty high.
I'm not sure I'm going to beat that. Sounds a tough one to beat.
But I think you might have some more sort of insider knowledge with maybe with the marine biology background. So let's see how you fare. Okay, so question 1, and you can't spend too much time on this either. No sort of like
quick fire
camera and firing up Google. So first one, the fastest fish in the ocean: 1, a wahoo; 2, sailfish; 3, mako shark.
Mako shark. Yeah, knew that one already.
Okay. Well, from my source, they're saying it's sailfish. Now, I thought it was a wahoo. So, but this might not be completely factually accurate.
I sort of spoke over the top of you there. Was mako shark the third one?
I don't know. Sailfish was the fastest, though. I thought that wahoo was the fastest. I was always told.
Oh, really?
But sailfish apparently.
Sorry, what was the third option? Because I didn't even wait for it.
It was wahoo, sailfish, or mako shark.
Oh, it was mako shark. I would have gone mako shark. That's what I always originally thought was the fastest. But maybe I'm wrong. Who knows?
They're right up there. But I mean, my source isn't that well fact checked, so you could be right. But I'm going to give you.
Well, as you asked the question, I was thinking mako shark, sorry, that's why I spoke over the top of you.
No.
No, if you've got the answers, we'll go with what the answers are, because my dad always does a quiz. My dad does a quiz at Christmas as well, and sometimes I'm like, that is not the right answer, but we've got to go with what you think is the right answer.
It's okay. So next one, flying fish can glide up to 560 feet. 660 feet or 760 feet.
Oh, we worked that out.
These are hard ones. I think these are hard.
That is. Seen them actually before when marlin fishing. I'd say the shortest one, 560.
Well, my source says 660. So they're known to be able to glide up to 660 feet, or that's 200 meters. And they can reach heights of up to 19 feet, which is 6 meters high.
Wow!
Amazing, isn't it?
Well, I've never seen them come out that high or that fast, but that's pretty impressive.
Okay, so an inflated porcupine fish can reach a diameter of up to 35 inches 45 inches or 55 inches?
Oh my God, 35 inches. 18 inches. Holy cow, that's enormous. What were they again? 35, 45 and 55?
Yeah.
I'd say 35.
Yeah. You're on the
Yes.
board.
35 inches.
It's
That's
massive.
enormous.
Yeah, 90 centimeters. Right. Most fish cannot swim backwards. There is one family which can. So tuna, eels, or carp.
Eel was, before you said it, I'm going to go with eels. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, you got it right.
That's, you get very peculiar fight on the rod with them as well when it's an eel.
Yeah.
Very strange.
What fish plays dead when it feels threatened by predators? Batfish, bream, or sunfish?
Oh, a sunfish, as they come up and lie on the surface, don't they? What was the first one? Batfish.
Batfish, bream, or sunfish?
It's going to be batfish or sunfish, I think. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'm going to go with... No, sunfish get too big. They're the largest teleost, 1.5 tons. I'm going to go batfish.
Good, that's very good. You got it right. So the batfish plays dead when it's in danger. It floats motionlessly from side to side when scared and looks a lot like a dead leaf.
Oh, really? Excellent.
I feel a bit tough about it. I've actually made these really, really hard. I don't know if subconsciously I knew that you sort of have a sort of biology background, but these are sort of like step up in toughness from the last one. But you're doing well. So you're 3 from 5. Okay. So it can rain fish. True or false?
It can rain fish. I would say, how could it rain fish? I could think of a couple of scenarios it could rain fish. So yes, I'm going to say true.
It is true. You're on a roll. So sometimes tornadoes pick up fish whilst traveling over the water and carry them over land. So these fish showers have been happening for thousands of years, and Roman writers have described the phenomenon in the 1st century.
Excellent. The other one that I was thinking was when they put forest fires out, they often grab the buckets on the helicopters, they grab lots of water, and then they go over and then they empty it. And so I suppose that might rain fish as well. If
That probably is another one. Right. There's a fish that can produce a bucket of slime in 1 minute. True or false?
True.
It's true. So the hagfish are some of the slimiest animals on Earth. An Atlantic hagfish can produce enough slime to fill a bucket in 1 minute. How big's a bucket?
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, that was the hagfish. So, slagfish are able to reproduce over 8 times in 1 year. True or false?
Slagfish?
Yeah.
False.
That's right. I made that up.
Brilliant.
So, a seahorse can move each of its eyes separately. True or false?
Each of its eyes separately?
Yeah.
Well, side of the head. Yeah. Seahorse is a fish, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that. I'm going to say true, purely on the basis that they don't have bifocal vision. So they're on either side of the head. They to cover different areas. I think that's true.
It is true. You've done really well at the moment. So One eye can look forwards while the other eye looks backwards. Seahorses can also change their colour to match their surroundings.
Yeah.
Um,
We get seahorses in the UK as well, actually. I studied, a friend of mine studied his undergraduate degree, or did his dissertation on seahorses in seagrass. Yeah, they're in the UK as well.
yeah. I think I might have seen them before, but you need nice clear water, don't you, obviously?
Yeah.
Okay, lamprey and hagfish are considered the most primitive forms of fish still living, the most toothy species living today, or the ugliest species of fish living today.
The most primitive, because they're jawless.
You're right.
Yeah, that's a marine biology fact, that one. Yeah, jawless fish. They predate jawed fish by miles.
You know what? You got 7 out of 10. You have drawn with Jason.
So
good going, actually. There were some really tough ones in there. Sorry about that. There were some really tough ones in there. I started reading through it. That's hard.
Excellent.
Okay.
That was good fun, actually. I enjoyed that.
To finish off, I've got a few questions from a few viewers. So, first one is from Baz Hadlington, and he asked about your strategy for tackling large reservoirs. What do you look for? Depth, contours, structure, etc.
Okay, I'll just split this into if I know the venue and if I don't know the venue. So if I was going onto a venue that I'd never been on before, first of all, you've obviously got to do your research, etc. Second of all, I tend to get maps and I look at the prevailing winds. So like I said earlier, winds in the east, the fish bite least. Winds in the west, the fish bite best. So when I get a map, I'll orient it to north, south, east, west, and I will generally avoid. So I'll always look for northern banks because they tend to be protected from cold winds coming down from Siberia, and they benefit from warm winds coming from the Caribbean. So generally, I'll look on like a northern bank somewhere is one of the first places. So if you look at Grafham, for example, all of the best spots, although you've obviously got the tower, which is structure, they're all across the northern side of it. And my favourite arm up in Rutland is the northern arm, and various bits of Pittsford. Pittsford's a bit funny because it kind of snakes a little bit. But wherever you can find a northern bank, I would definitely concentrate there to start with. Second of all, totally depends on the time of year. If you were looking anywhere from, so for example, September to December, they're going to be feeding heavily as much as possible. They're stacking all of that weight on. So they're going to be relating to bait fish massively. When you come into late December, January, more towards February, water temperatures right down. So they're going to be the fattest that they're ever going to be. But they're especially in sort of February, pike in particular, March, maybe looking towards perch. They're going to be towards, you've got to look at your transition routes towards where they're going to breed, where they're going to spawn. So, those first three months of the winter relate to bait fish. I'm always looking for that. The next 3 months into the new year, I'm probably looking a little bit more because they're going to start making their way towards those spawning bays. So looking for shallow spawning bays, often if there's a feeder stream running in, a little bit of fresh water, a little bit of food, a little bit of nutrients coming in, that'll be a good, anywhere that's going to be shallow, weedy with a little bit of water coming in will be a spawning bay. If you're perch fishing, 100% structure addicts. I always say that. Towers, jetties, buoys, yacht clubs, underwater structures as well. And particularly when it gets when it gets really cold. So now anything sub 7 degrees, I tend to look for very steep banks as well. So if you've got a difference between like a long sloping bay, you might be at the mouth of the bay and you might have, say, 12 foot, and then it goes back up to 4 foot, but it's like 200 or 300 yards long. That's a long sloping bay. Anywhere that you can find an area that's got very, very sharp drop-offs, when that water's really cold, that's where you want to concentrate, because those fish, otherwise, they might have to swim 200 or 300 yards to find any depth difference. But on a really steep bank, when you get those really, really cold nights, they're going to want to be in that deep water where it's a little bit more stable. Then if you get one of those sunny days, we've had a couple recently, and the water temperature just comes up 0.5 degree, they want to migrate the shortest distance, and that might be up a really steep shelf to find that warm water, and they'll only come up there for a few hours, and then they'll move back into that deep water, but they don't want to travel very far, and that's only going to be 40 or 50 yards maybe. So underwater steep banks when it's really cold, much flatter profile areas when the water temperature is a little bit warmer. So yeah, northern banks, structure for perch, deep water for zander, deep very steep shelves when it gets really cold for any of the species. Yeah, keep your eyes on those wind directions and stuff as well. What time of year? Yeah, that's probably a good all-round.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's some brilliant advice in there. Okay, so we've got another question here from Lee Holland. Okay, so could you ask Thom to tell us how he got to be where he is today, fishing for his country, and probably more importantly, what's next?
Yeah, so this year, Kev and I have been a solid sort of fishing partnership and creating some really, really good results now for about 3 years, I'd say. I've always had a goal to fish for my country in the predator side of stuff, and I'd been following. You know, I was always looking at the team and following the team and the World Championships, what they've been up to for probably about the last 6 or 7 years. And there's lots of members and management and all that sort of stuff that have changed throughout the years. But then basically, you know, a couple of years ago, new management, new team came in, and Kev and I were sort of, you know, felt like we were in, just purely due to our results. We were getting a lot of, so in the last 3 years, I think I've fished, God, I have to work it out because I'm added this year up, but I've had, what are we up to now? I'm probably up to 4 good wins this year. I try and get 3 big tournament wins a year. So probably had, I don't know, 12 to 15 tournament wins over the last 3 or 4 years. But the consistency is key as well. You know, I think I've had a top 4 finish in about 75% of the tournaments that I've finished, which is unbelievably high. There's only a small handful that I've had blowouts on. So, but again, a lot of it comes down to, so if you're thinking about wanting to fish for your country, get on the tournament circuit. You've got to go and fish those competitions. It can be, you know, there's various club ones. Tussie's run some, Lure Anglers Canal Club run some. They're really, you know, open, friendly, etc., etc. Just start booking onto a few, start getting into it, because tournament fishing and pleasure fishing are like chalk and cheese. They're completely different. A lot of people think, oh, I'm a good lure angler, and then they just can't manage to make it go across into the tournament scene, because different disciplines. But if you're thinking about, you know, we had our sights set on getting selected, put a huge amount of effort in, and then eventually, you know, people just know that you're consistently at the top, and you get a call up. You know, you get an England call up, and we got into the team this year. World Championships was obviously postponed in 2020 due to COVID, but we have got, well, fingers crossed, we've got Poland World Championships in 2021. We've got World Championships in the USA in 2022. So looking forward to those. Hopefully they can obviously go ahead. And probably a bit more international fishing or European fishing. You know, they've got some huge tournaments, Predator Tour, World Predator Classic, Crank Cup, World Crank Cup. They're often hosted over in Holland. So, you know, this year is really just about investing in a boat, having a good setup, probably traveling a bit more. It's going to be tricky because I've got a baby on the way as well. But where there's a will, there's a way, you know, and it's big for me as well. Having support from, you know, I'm sponsored by Westin, Hummingbird, Minn Kota, and I get support from Predator Tackle as well in the UK. So, you know, having that amount of support, and more than anything, it's access to the quality of anglers. You know, if I decided at any point in time I wanted to go to France or Sweden or Holland or anything, you know, I've got a huge team of people in the Westin team that I can pick the phone up to, and I could say, can you help me out? I want to learn to do this. You know, it comes down to, so again, notwithstanding like the COVID thing, I'm going to try and get out to Sweden. I want to learn more about pelagic fishing with Xander. I want to learn about, you know, there's various different specific methods that I'm not totally clued up on in the UK, and there's absolute world leaders that we've got in Europe, and I've got access to some of those guys, you know. So that is absolutely amazing if you can. But I think a lot of people, and maybe the sponsorship thing's worth saying a little mention on for a minute or two, because it's quite divided here in the UK. I think the ultimate thing that you need, everyone wants to have a sponsorship deal. You have to provide value is the number one thing. You have to be a valuable angler. So either you've got to win tournaments, so you get legitimacy through that, so people are going to listen to you. You've either got to catch big fish, or you've got to be, I mean, the content side of stuff is big, you know, so it's like, do you produce YouTube videos, and do you produce, like, you know, Facebook pictures and articles and stuff like that? That for me, I think, is the bit that annoys a lot of people, is that you can be amazing on YouTube but not actually the greatest angler, or you can be amazing on any of the social media platforms. I'm probably the other way around. I put more of my pride into actually creating, you know, fishing results, and then I do a little bit of, you know, like you said earlier, my YouTube channel, I can't edit to save my life. So I literally sit in my tackle room, come up with something that I want to talk about, some of these technical details, maybe on how do you select the right battery for your fish finder, how do you do the settings on this, how to fish a drop shot, how do I tie up, you know, what rating of rod do I use, how do I, you know, do I use braid or fluorocarbon, blah blah blah. I'll pick a subject and I'll basically just talk about it for 10 or 15 minutes, but all of those, the fine details that I've learned over the years. So, you know, it's probably not the most exciting. I'd love this year to maybe get out and take my GoPro and try and learn some edit skills, but it's not at the top of my priorities list, to be honest. I'm more of a thinking angler, and when I go fishing, I'm practicing and I want to get involved in that. I don't really want to have to think about camera angles and stuff like that. So if there's a really easy way to do it, I might do that. But other than that, yeah,
I'll make you a deal. If you wanna learn how to edit, I'll teach you how to edit, and you can take me out fishing.
Deal, mate. Yeah. Absolutely. I'd be all over that. I just, you know, I think you've got to pick your poison. You can't be good at everything. And, you know, for me personally, the number one thing is my competition focus, my Team England focus, you know, and ultimately at some stage, I want to be world champion. And I don't want to be, you know, to a certain degree, I don't really want to be like Carl and Alex. I don't want to have like 150,000 subscribers and have to spend all my time trying to get underwater release shots or trying to edit something or try whatever. That's not who I am. So, no. But in terms of information and technique and experience and competition strategy and stuff like that, that's who I am. So I just stay in my wheelhouse, you know.
No, I mean, I completely get that. I mean, for me, like, your videos are very, very content rich. Like, there's a huge amount of really good working knowledge in there, which you can extract. And I think that will always, or should always, top everything else. Whereas you go onto other people's YouTube channels, and I include myself in this because I know that I will never be at the same kind of level as you are, because you've really dedicated so much time and effort and thought to it, and I just don't have the space to do that. But so my kind of channel is much more about different stuff, like just storylines and making nice pictures, probably more than anything.
Yeah.
I'm not going to catch the biggest fish, and I'm not going to be consistently catching big fish. But
to be honest, though, those are the channels that have got a much better, if you think of what's the reason that people go onto YouTube, it's either entertainment or knowledge. And entertainment is probably outweighing the knowledge and how-tos like 10 to 1. You've probably got a much better chance of getting way more subscribers than I ever could if you create actual fishing footage. There's I follow a chap called Dan DB Fishing, I think.
Oh,
he's
got
10 or 20,000 subscribers, and he gets like, some of his hits are like 150,000 views and stuff like that. A lot of his stuff is all fishing stuff on the bank, and he makes great, fairly simple, but like just good, does a lot of pike fishing, gets some amazing footage, of pike swiping up and smashing baits, in clear water and stuff like that. And he's got good editing skills and whatever, and more power to him. I think it's brilliant. It gets fishing out there, but entertainment is going to outweigh the knowledge side of it, like 10 to 1 at least.
Yeah, I can see that to an extent, but I still think that like the information part, I mean, like, for example, you want to learn how to swim, there's going to be a YouTube video which teaches you how to swim, or you want to learn how to cook, or you want, and those ones really quick, concise, and knowledgeable, rather than a sort of like hunch. Actually having somebody who's a definitive knowledge on what they're talking about, giving you, which you can sort of trust. And I think that's what comes with your channel, actually. And although it might mean that it takes a bit longer for it to build up, I think I personally think that will take over. It just has to get the kind of like recognition.
Takes a while.
With everything. So let's do one last question. So Brian writes, who has been the biggest influence in your fishing, past and present?
I would say in the past it was so my dad and my granddad, my dad in particular, sort of taking me fishing initially down the canal and kind of getting me into it, that he was a huge influence. I think in my early days as well, back in my match fishing days, there was two that stood out. And funnily enough, I'm not even in the match fishing world at all, and I haven't been for years. And just 2 days ago, I was watching another one of his videos, Will Raisin and Alan Scott Horn, but Will Raisin in particular. I actually grew up not very far from Gold Valley Lakes, where his family owned, and I just sort of watched him go through. Not really, I was younger than him, but like I was in and around that area, seeing him get his first opportunity. He was amazing at Gold Valley when he was a teenager, and then going through and getting all of that international experience and becoming world champion. And his results are just unbelievable. So especially in my early days, but even still to a degree now, people at the top of their game, like that, and the attention to detail that those guys put in is unbelievable. And I learned a huge amount from that. And I'd say more recently, Kev, my boat partner, Kev Cox, unbelievable angler, like a real natural talented angler, and then puts a load of thinking, effort, time and stuff on top of that, which is brilliant. And again, he's got a background of specimen, barbel, chub, tench fishing. I think when you become a really good, you can be a much better angler in any one particular, so we specialize in lure fishing now, but that actually comes from an experience that we've got in big game fishing, stalking barbel on crystal clear waters. You know, he worked at a fish farm. I studied marine biology. All of that fishy knowledge of any type of fishing all around the world actually allows you to reach the top in when you focus in on one particular strain. And from the US, there's none better than KVD. Kevin Van Dam is the best largemouth bass fishing tournament angler that's ever been, you know. And the legends like that, every single bit of video content I've watched 10 times over on YouTube that's got anything to do with him, you know, because I think once you realize that those people have created results consistently over long decades, you know, and they've been at the top, that you can trust what they say. When they say this is the way to do it, it actually simplifies it for yourself. You just go, right, that's the way to do it. I don't need to try and, you know, get it wrong 50 times before I get it right again. You're already in the right ballpark for success. So, and they all say the same thing. Be prepared, get loads of experience, and go longer, harder, and faster than anyone else. That is the recipe. I think you need a bit of natural talent, but yeah, those guys at the top of their game in anything are the ones that I really admire.
Oh, that's brilliant. Look, mate, this has been a really, really nice interview, and I've really, really enjoyed fishing with you, talking with you. I hope I do get to fish with you at some stage.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, thanks so much for spending your time talking to us. And this will be coming up on my channel soon enough. And yeah, if
Excellent.
I don't speak to you before New Year, Happy New Year. And yeah, and good luck in the future. But I don't think you need luck. I think you're creating your own luck very well there.
Well, thanks for having me on. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. You know, I always just one little word or thank you for you as well. You know, we put this content out online, and you put a huge amount of effort into, you know, like you said, editing or even just bothering to go around and interview us. It's easy from my side, but you're doing the hard work, and you don't often get a thanks for that. A lot of people are always willing to peck you and criticize, but like, mate, you do it for free and you put the content out there. And yeah, I've watched Jason's one now, and I'll watch the other ones as well. So from a punter's point of view, thank you for putting the content out there, because yeah, I know we have to grow a bit of a thick skin sometimes to get through all of the criticism and the comments and stuff, but there's plenty of people out there that don't say thanks but do appreciate it. So from a punter, I'll say thank you to you. You know, definitely.
I appreciate that, but to be honest, I get to speak to people like yourself, and that's more than enough for me. Because
nice one.
It's really, really nice. You know, I would never get the opportunity, or you know, have your full attention like I've had for like the last hour, and it's brilliant. I'm learning so much from all of these interviews, but this one has been particularly informative, and I will definitely be poring back over this and making notes. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, let's get out fishing soon, and yeah, Happy New Year to you, Happy New Year to everyone, and thanks for watching.
Cool, man. Okay, see you later on. Bye, mate.
Cheers. Bye.